Hello and welcome to the Guardian Football Weekly. Liverpool get away with a 2-0 defeat in the Parc des Princes, outplayed by PSG from the start. They couldn't get the ball. So many great performances from the Parisians. Vitinha, Zaire Emery, João Neves, his pass to Kvaratskhelia for the second, and then the Georgians' composure was glorious. The only saving grace for Arne Slot is that it is only 2. Meanwhile, in Barcelona, the whole game changes in a minute. Barca were on top, creating but not finishing before Cubarsi got caught, fouled his man, and Alvarez curled in a beauty. The home side kept pushing, but Norway's other big man, Alexander Sorloth, got a vital second for Atleti. Also today, a Premier League preview, huge games at the top and the bottom. There's more on Gianni and FIFA's new incredibly wholesome gambling partners. Your questions, and that's today's Guardian Football Weekly. On the panel today, Barry Glendenning, welcome.
Hi, Max.
Hello, Lars Sivertsen.
Hello, Max.
And bonjour, ça va, Philippe Auclair.
Bonjour, ça va, Max Rushden.
Exactly. Let's start then in Paris. PSG 2, Liverpool 0. Chris says, "Were Liverpool playing like the apocalypse had actually happened?" I mean, it was 2, Lars. It could have been so many more, couldn't it? Liverpool created nothing, and I mean, we've watched the 4 quarterfinals now, and it seems so clear that PSG and Bayern are basically playing a different game to everyone else, I think.
Yeah, though I do think PSG at their best are terrifying. I think the way they move the ball around, like I say this as always through gritted teeth, but I do find them immensely enjoyable to watch, the way they put passing moves together. 2 very good Georgians in this game. I think Mamardashvili had one of his better games in goal from Liverpool. He came up with some really, really big saves. He had to. I want to this is a dangerous thing to do in the current climate. I want to stick up for one aspect of Arne Slot's approach here, in that I don't think the formation change is inherently crazy. I was kind of previewing this game, and I was looking at it thinking, you're playing PSG, who've got probably the most dangerous wingers of any team in world football, and you've had problems at fullback all year, whether that's Frimpong, who's more of an attacker than a defender, whether that's Kerkez, who's been a bit of a liability, giving Van Dijk some extra help there with an extra centre-half and allowing, in theory, these fullbacks to attack a little bit more. That actually structurally makes total sense for Liverpool. There's total logic to that. But it doesn't work if you're going to be as passive as you are. Now, I also think sitting back against PSG is a logical thing to do. But here's the thing about being slightly more defensive, sitting back a little bit, playing with a low block, if you will. You still have to be aggressive when you do engage the opponents. And this is the very alarming thing about Liverpool now for me, is that they're so passive. There's so many people kind of standing around. That sort of aggression and spirit they seem to have on the club seems to have deserted them massively. So I think the structure was not a disaster really as such, but the execution was so lacking from Liverpool, and they look like, I hate the sort of amateur psychology thing that we do sometimes here, but they do look like they don't have a lot of faith in what they're doing right now.
But then, Barry, it's hard when you don't have the ball, right? I mean, I know they weren't planning to have the ball much, but they didn't really have it at all. And as Lars mentioned, the way PSG moved this ball, there was one move, I think, just before half-time where Neves plays the pass with his shoulder and then Nuno Mendes does a cushioned side-foot volley. It's like an advert for through the airport. It's like that Brazil advert, and it carries on with an instep volley and this. And you think, this is just a beautiful people playing. We were talking about Arsenal not being entertaining, and you're watching this going, this is just a joy.
That's wonderful. I think in his colour piece from Paris, Barney described Liverpool as men in red shirts running around quite near a football match, and that's pretty much it in a nutshell. They couldn't get a sniff of the ball. I think they had 26% possession or something. The way PSG pass and move it around is mesmerising. I think I said the same about Bayern Munich. I don't blame Arne Slot for trying something new, but it didn't work. I think part of the reason it didn't work is because Ousmane Dembele wasn't really playing as a centre forward. He was moving all over the place. Liverpool's central defenders didn't know whether to stick or twist. They were getting pulled out of shape. And then when you've the likes of Vitinha in midfield, just pinging the ball around with this metronomic precision to players of the quality of Kvaratskhelia. As you say, the only positive for Liverpool to take from this game is the fact that they're only 2-0 down, because this is the second pasting they've got in the space of a week. Two completely different kinds of pastings, I would argue. And are we in voice note territory? I don't know. But they still have a pulse as far as this tie is concerned, but not much more.
Yeah. I don't know, Philippe, what you make of this. Obviously, you don't necessarily want PSG to win everything, but it's quite hard not to appreciate this football, right?
It's impossible. It's impossible, and also I think collectively and individually, because it's not just that it seems that they are actually a very attractive team when it comes to the characters. If you don't like Kvaratskhelia, you really don't like football, do you? It's impossible not to absolutely love him. And that goal, the shimmy, the feint before he shoots. Oh my God. I've got, my hair standing on it when I think about it. It's just glorious. And there are so few of those players. That's the bit as well, is that this team, some of the players are actually throwbacks. They're not athletic. Athletically, some of them are super fast, super strong, but others are quite, they're what we call petit gabarit in French. They're not shrimps, but they're not super big lobsters. They're kind of prawns, right? Okay, in terms of size.
Langoustines?
Langoustines. The langoustine, absolutely.
They're the crayfish of football.
Crayfish go backwards, so they go forward. So I'll have the langoustine, and and you have to say, if Dembele, how many chances does he miss? At least three.
Whoa.
At least three.
Yeah, I mean the one at the start of the second half is he's got to score that, hasn't he? But yeah, lots.
It's crazy. So it's Dembele back to being the old Dembele before the Ballon d'Or in that season. And I think what's really frightening, or not frightening, depending on which side of the fence you are, is that it's a typical PSG season. They found it with Luis Enrique, that is, as in difficult start to the season, not doing fantastically well during the league phase of the Champions League, struggling in Ligue 1 because RC Lens is basically at one point was actually ahead of them. And then, mysteriously, as winter turns to spring, hello, here comes PSG again. And you see them as you saw them last year. And it's absolutely frightening. And it's even like, for example, last year, you would have thought, this midfield was the best midfield on the planet. But one of its elements is missing at the moment. Fabian Ruiz hasn't been playing since the end of January. So, which is all, by the way, absolutely fantastic for the French national team, because Zaire Emery is getting some proper game time and really improving from game to. He was superb last night. It was crazy.
Was brilliant.
So, through gritted teeth like everybody else, yes, they're marvelous. And I think that they're so good that it comes to the point where the cognitive dissonance you have between the project, the owners, and what you see on the pitch is so big that it doesn't really matter anymore. Is that when I think of PSG, the club, I think about the Qataris and all these things. When I see them play, all I can think of is I want that little Georgian boy with the ball at his feet. I want Desiree Doué being caught like he's surrounded by four players and he still manages with almost no backlift. And I know there's a little deflection, come on, but he still manages to score
quite a big deflection,
that
but
goal.
Still. Yeah.
And the the cheek of it, to even attempt it, is it's like Maradona, this famous picture with the Belgian defenders who you've got, he's facing everybody. And which is more of an illusion, by the way, in the case of Maradona. Here, he genuinely was in the middle of four players. Doesn't matter. I'm still going to hit it. No, they were absolutely fantastic.
Alexander says there's something about Kvaratskhelia that doesn't scream footballer. He's more enigmatic post-grad from SOAS, who each week turns up as a +1, dribbles past everyone before saying absolutely nothing at the pub post-match. I just thought it was very...
That's really good, but there is something about how he doesn't look like most attackers because he's not gone through one of these academies. He's never been told by coaches that you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to do this. You're supposed to lay it off. You're supposed to set up 1-2 interviews. You know, he wasn't told. He just played football when he was younger, and it turns out it's still possible to be this kind of inspirational winger type man. He's my favorite player to watch in the world, bar none. I want to just put this to Philippe, because you've probably watched PSG more times this season than I have. I wonder if there's an element of them, like you say, really switching it on now, because they've had to maybe switch it off a little bit early in the season, just because if you look at their schedule the last 18 months, it's mental. They've had no rest at all, and Enrique almost doesn't rotate. So some of the more iffy performances they've had earlier in the year, is there an element that maybe they were saving themselves a little bit?
I think that there was an element, and if that's the case, chapeau to the team at PSG, medical team and technical staff as well, because they arrived, they were absolutely knackered. They didn't have holidays, they didn't have a pre-season, which means that they had, just like Chelsea, by the way, because of this bloody Club World Cup. So when they started the season, they had injuries, they had players who were not fit. Doué was not great for a long time this season, for example, and little by little, they gathered speed. But they've done that, the season before that as well. It seems to be that he and his team managed to put together a preparation plan, physical preparation plan, which took into consideration the fact that they had no time for physical preparation. I don't know if this makes sense, but in any case, well done, because the transformation is extraordinary over the last 2.5 months, I would say.
Can we do a Liverpool inquest then, Lars? It is hard with the caveats of they're playing a really good team, and even a flying Liverpool would struggle against PSG like they did last year, right? They PSG were very good in the home leg against Liverpool, even though they didn't win it. The players do look so off it, don't they? Like McAllister just looked exhausted. Konate is running in treacle. I mean, that was such a blatant penalty at the end. I don't know how it wasn't given. Van Dijk, we've spoken about. It does look, and we've talked about all the issues with Liverpool, but it looks like it's collectively just incredibly flat.
Yeah, so I preempted this earlier in the episode by saying, like, I track the thinking in the formation switch. I don't think that is a bizarre and weird thing to do. I think it does actually kind of make total sense. And I'm sure if Arne Slot was here, he would have a very rational explanation for it. But for me, there's something... it's unfair to keep comparing them to Klopp, right? Because Klopp has moved on and this is a different team. But the thing that made Liverpool very, very successful under him was, in large part, this incredible energy they had, the heavy metal football that gradually matured into maybe some sort of orchestral rock football or whatever. But there was a lot of loud guitars in there still, anyway. And then last season, they won the league. There was a sense that they had been added a little bit of nuance. They were controlling the game a little bit more. They were taking the tempo down a little bit so they didn't have to run around like crazy people all the time. But this season, it seems like they've taken another step in the direction of having less energy, less running. And there have been so many performances by Liverpool that have just looked a little bit anemic and one-paced. And I thought there was a lot of that here. I also wonder, as much as I will defend the logic of the formation switch, I also do, to contradict myself a little bit, I do wonder how much they've practiced this. I wonder how familiar are all the center halves completely au fait with like who's supposed to step up and who's supposed to cover, because they did look a little bit uncertain at times, I thought.
Yeah, and Barry, you don't obviously become good or bad, overnight. But I don't know, if I was a Liverpool fan, I'd be looking at a lot of these players and thinking, how many have come to the end of their cycle, and the recruitment, like Kirkers and Frimpong may come good, but they haven't yet. The midfield, like Szoboszlai stands out in this season as someone who has been good amidst a sea, and Ekitike, amongst a sea of players that haven't.
Yeah, and Szoboszlai probably wasn't even supposed to be in this Liverpool team. It was expected he would be edged towards the fringes of the squad once Wirtz came in. We've seen flashes from Wirtz, but he hasn't delivered. As you say, Kirkes, Frimpong haven't delivered yet. And Mo Salah wasn't even picked last night, didn't get it wasn't brought on off the bench either. He's significantly or pointedly off it. Virgil, Konate as well. And it's not just a one-off. They've been off it. Gravenberch as well has been poor this season. So when you have that many big players not performing, it's obviously going to have a detrimental effect on the team. They've spent 450 million quid to make the squad significantly worse to last year's. I think yesterday was their 16th defeat of this season. That's compared to 9 last time round. So they can't sack all the players. So someone's going to have to go, aren't they?
You're right. And listen, I'm going to predict, Philippe, that Sid refers to a lot of cliches in part 2. I've no way of knowing that. But it is also a cliche that Anfield under the lights is something else. Like, can you envisage them? I mean, it seems so unlikely, doesn't it? And yet, I suppose we had Barcelona. I mean, it just feels so different. This feels, even though the scoreline is less, it feels like one of the biggest mountains they will have to climb.
To be honest, I really can't see happening, not against that particular opponent, not with those particular players, because it's not as if Liverpool had a night off or a night to forget, because there have been plenty of others. So it was a logical performance, and everybody was expecting a pasting, and it should have been a pasting. And, Arne Slot actually was the first person to say that they were lucky to come, for the 2-0. So no, I can't see it happen. I really cannot. And to be honest, the atmosphere at Anfield is a bit strange these days anyway, because it seems like a lot of the fans, I'm not booing their team or anything like that, but a lot of their fans have decided Arne Slot is not the man for the job. Xabi Alonso is coming. It's sort of a question of gritting our teeth until the change comes, and the change will come. Color, one thing that Barry has said, I don't necessarily agree with him when it comes to Florian Wirtz. I think Florian Wirtz is a magnificent footballer and who has been one of the best performers, or better performers rather, of Liverpool in recent months. What I find really quite shocking, revealing, is that he and Hugo Ekitike are, for me, playing on a different plane. They're playing faster. They're faster in their brains than everybody else around them. They seem to have some energy and some desire to create, and they are constantly looking for each other. And when it works, when it clicks, it's absolutely beautiful what they can do together. But unfortunately, it's only the two of them. That's it. And Szoboszlai does what he can, but you can't run a midfield all by yourself, which is he has to do. He has to be the guy who is there, not just to bring the drinks and the champagne to the attackers, but also to make sure that the dishes are washed clean in the kitchen. He has to do absolutely everything, and he can't.
Mm-hmm.
No, Anfield, the Anfield role or whatever, forget about it. I really can't see happening. What I see happening is PSG actually probably opening the scoring and the game petering out with an easy qualification for the Parisians.
The thing is as well, Liverpool have a big game against Fulham on Saturday in the evening, and PSG have the weekend off because their game against Lens has been postponed, hasn't it?
Yes, it's the French thing of not being at all, not favouring at all the big clubs in the competition. And the big clubs, the big club, singular. It's become a thing, and it might have something to do with the fact that the chairman of PSG also sits on the board of the organization, which decides whether those games are going to be postponed or not. There you go.
Lars, it does lead us. We are close to 2 legs of PSG Bayern, which should be brilliant, right?
Yeah, with apologies to Arsenal, that would feel almost like I am going to get in trouble for this, but that would feel like the real final.
Yeah, I mean, I have written, and the trophy to be given to whoever wins that semi.
Yeah,
I'm as in trouble as you.
So
are.
here's the thing. Let's just, I've said this a million times this season. I'll say it again. I do think Arsenal are incredible. I think they've got they're the best defensive team in Europe, probably. And that's just not as fun to talk about. It's going to win them the league, so it's fine. And it might even go on to win them the Champions League, but it isn't as a neutral. It's not the most fun thing in the world. Whereas, but Bayern are the best. Bayern and PSG seem like the best teams to watch around Europe at the moment. And that's going to be an absolutely incredible occasion, if indeed that happens. I mean, are we writing off the Real Madrid thing? That feels unsafe.
It does. Because it all feels unsafe, of course.
I know you covered it
once it's a final. Yes, Lars.
I know you covered it in the other episode, but I do think the way Bayern just were not able to see out the game against Real Madrid. Like, they took the 2-0 lead, but then they kept, like, that second half drove me crazy because you're in a 2-0 lead and Real Madrid keeps bursting into loads of space behind the Bayern defense. I was like, why are you leaving this much space? Why are you doing this? So, like, they're not great at defending, which means I think that tie is still kind of sort of alive a little bit. But at least, if we do get PSG Bayern, that would be tremendous fun.
All right, that'll do for part one. Sid will join us in part two. Welcome to part two of the Guardian Football Weekly. Let's bring in Sid Lowe live from a modest range hotel in Barcelona, I would suggest. How are you, Sid?
Good morning, Max. It's so modest I had to give up on the eggs at breakfast this morning. They were taking too long. I would not have made it to this here podcast, so I had to abandon them.
Pray for Sid. If anybody is near Sid and can send him some eggs, that would be delightful. Anyway, Barca 0, Atleti 2. First win at the Nou Camp since 2006. Sid, you were there. How was it?
I thought it was really good fun, actually, and it was shaping up to be a very different game, I think, than the one it became, because obviously the red card and the goal just before halftime, I think, changed that. I felt that Barcelona lacked some of the things that they've had all year. Obviously, the absence of Rafinha is a big deal, although his replacement, Marcus Rashford, was probably their most dangerous player. And Atletico you're right, it's a huge victory. The first time they've won there with Diego Simeone, who I think it was his 45th game against Barcelona. Admittedly, obviously not all of them at the Camp Nou, but the first time he's won there, and it puts them in a really good position.
Yeah, and like the game changes on the red card, right? Barca are the better team, but it is a red card. On the first viewing, I thought, he's unlucky to be sent off, but he's unlucky to commit the foul. But then I don't know what you think. I think if you watch it again, he's got to just stop running, right? He's just got to let him go.
Yeah, I'm always a bit uneasy about these kind of decisions, if only because I could, understand the reason for giving them. But I always feel really sorry for players who make absolutely no attempt whatsoever to foul anyone, who are not really even making an attempt to tackle them. And there is a bit of me that, your explanation of it there is I suppose part of the reason why I feel uneasy about it. Because if the explanation is stop running, it feels like a really unfair thing to ask a defender to do. Let him go. So, well, why shouldn't I go with him? But yeah, I think the decision was probably the right one. Well, definitely the right one considering what the rules are. I just wonder sometimes if there needs to be a bit more nuance into the rules. But the last thing we want is more caveats in the rules because, we're already moaning about inconsistency.
Well, actually, Sid, under the Paul Doyle law, which I still like, that would be a penalty, but not a red card, like a foul of someone clean through. And I actually quite like that as a law change. But you're right, people just yell at you whenever you want to do anything with the game, and probably rightly so. Philippe, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I'm just wondering because that there is a foul. We all agree on that. Is it a clear goal-scoring opportunity? I'm sorry, I've watched a few times, like I'm sure all of you have done. The ball bounces off the attacker's arse, right? And is he in control of the ball at the moment the foul is committed? No. Is the ball too far ahead of him for him to control it? Yes. So I can see the chain of events leading to the red card, but I do think it's not quite as clear-cut as... No?
That's the nuance that gets talked about, Philippe. That's the nuance that gets talked about in Spain sometimes with these kind of goal-scoring opportunities, which they actually use. They use the English phrase. What is it? Dogs off? Dogs. Well, thank you. Whatever they call it in Spain, they try to call it that, and they probably do a better job than me. But one of the questions is always that: is he actually in control of the ball, and is he running through on goal, or is the ball going wide? Obviously, when that's happening quick, and even if you then do go to the VAR, there's always that nuance about referees trying to decide how far it's under control. But the funny thing is, no one complained about that last night. That wasn't the issue. Flick post game. He said, Flick post game said, yeah, there was the VAR was what was his phrase? He said the VAR was very focused today, and it was a German guy. So thanks for that, Germany. But he wasn't talking about that. He was talking obviously about the. He was in the sense that it went to VAR and the decision was made, but there was no complaints about that decision. The complaints from Flick were more about the repetition of fouls on Lamine Yamal in his view. In particular, there was a real sense that Koke got away with a handful in the first half, having already got a yellow card. And then the other one was a bizarre moment, which I must confess I didn't see first time round, which is the handball penalty red card that the referee ignored because the goalkeeper, Juan Musso, takes the goal kick, gives it to Marc Pouville, who puts his hand on the ball and then takes the goal kick himself. Simeone said that was just common sense. And I think if you watch it back, you can interpret it as he hasn't actually taken the goal kick. He's given it to his teammate to take it. But it looks a bit like he's taken the goal kick. And Flick certainly thought he couldn't understand why that wasn't given as a penalty and what would have been a red card, because I think Marc Pouville already had a yellow at that point.
Yeah, I'm on the common sense part of that. But Baz, you think that's a stonewall penalty?
I do, yeah. We've seen them given before against Tyrone Mings and not given against Arsenal's Gabriel. I thought this was as egregious as any of them. I thought the keeper had played the ball to Pugil, and he handled it deliberately. And he did look like a trump if it had been given against him. It's a big risk for him to take. He clearly thought the goal kick hadn't been taken, but I'm not so sure about that.
Fair enough. I mean, the Alvarez free kick, Sid, I mean, it's so good, isn't it?
And it's really important, actually, because it's obviously important because it's a free kick that gives them a lead in the Champions League. But I mean, it's been
the
important
insight we get you on for. Sid.
That is, I mean, it's massive. This kind of stuff, Max, it's amazing. It's really important to score an amazing goal in a big Champions League game. You know, that's much more important than handling a goal kick. But no, it's important for Julián Alvarez, who's had a really strange season. So Julián has been built up as the player that's likely to lead Atlético in the future. That's likely to be their kind of key player. But he had a very, very difficult. He scored on the opening day away at Espanyol, and then didn't score away again. I think for something like 3 months. Went for a really poor spell in terms of his performance levels. He then did something I think very ill-advised, which is post-game when he had finally scored, and he was asked about his future. He basically said, "Well, who knows where I'm going to be?" And on a day in which I think I can't remember which game it is now, but Atlético Madrid had won a game. He played really well. It was everyone was happy, and he goes and sort of ruins the mood with this comment amidst lots of talk of Barcelona being interested in him. And I think what's important is he started to play really, really well recently after a really difficult period earlier in the season. And looking like that player that I always feel with Julián, there's a slight doubt with Atlético Madrid about whether they want him to be the highest of the strikers or the second line of the strikers. Is he a number 9 or is he a number 10? And so when they play with Sorloth, obviously he's the number 10. When they play with Griezmann, he's the number 9. He can do a bit of both. He covers a lot of the pitch. That run in the first few minutes yesterday was fantastic. His is the pass for the red card. He then, of course, scores the free kick as well. His ability to link everything up is brilliant. And I think he'll be really, really important for them if they are going to achieve anything in the Champions League. But it hasn't been a great season. The other players, allow me to say this. There was a lovely moment before the game, which also, with hindsight, you think, well, was it actually a very clever moment from Diego Simeone? He did the pre-match press conference with Antoine Griezmann, who, of course, has just announced that he's going to Orlando. And before the press conference started, the two of them were sitting there together, Simeone and Griezmann. And Simeone said, "Can I just say something?" And he went on this discussion of what a great person Griezmann is. He's a model for society. We need more people like this. I love you. You've been amazing. I consider you a friend as well as a player. So, but if you don't run tomorrow, you're not playing. But he did this really kind of quite emotional thing. And Griezmann was basically asked to reciprocate. And Griezmann said, "Well, for me to really open my heart, I think I need to be at home with my family and my kids and maybe Diego's family, but perhaps not here." But he did this really kind of, Simeone, this really sort of personal and emotional thing with Griezmann, who then played brilliantly. And I just sort of, Griezmann is old now. And last year he had, I thought, a few difficulties kind of accepting this new role. And he's talked about admitting that he had this difficulty accepting this new role where he wasn't playing all the time. He's still their best footballer. And if you look at that second goal, and this doesn't often happen, admittedly, when you're doing a match report, because you normally, it's all happening a bit too kind of frantically. I managed to actually properly watch that entire move without, looking down at the keyboard, without writing or anything. It starts with Griezmann dribbling his way out of his own area, releasing the pressure from Barcelona, playing, I think, a 1-2 with one of the central defenders, playing it into the middle of midfield. Then Atletico slow the ball down, recycle it, bring it round the other side. Griezmann, again, is the one that provides the penultimate pass to Ruggeri, who then provides the cross for the goal. And I just think he is a criminally underrated footballer who Atletico are going to miss.
And whom France are going to miss big time. I'm still, every time I see him play, I just wonder, why did you retire? Well, I know why he retired, because he wasn't given the captaincy. That's why he retired from international football. But he's the one type of player we don't have with France. and is irreplaceable. And I think actually Didier Deschamps used that expression for him, is irreplaceable. And that there is, I mean, I cannot support you in your opinion enough, Sid, because I consider him to be one of the 3 greatest French footballers of all time. And he's going to be terribly missed. And it's shocking because seeing what he does with Atlético, he's got a place in the French national team. There's absolutely no doubt about that, even if he doesn't play every single game. But when you remember, he's been France's best player in 2016, 2018, 2022, each tournament. And we're not going to have him. And it's going to be a big miss. If I can ask you a question, Sid, by the way, which is not Griezmann related, it's still Atlético related. I have to say that the type of football that they played, and maybe I didn't watch enough of them this season, but the type of football they played, and actually before the sending off, there were moments I thought this is actually bloody good football. The combinations, they looked much sharper. They looked much more positive. Not at all the Atlético we're supposed to hate, which is all prickly and defensive and counter-attack. There was actually some really good stuff being played there. So have I missed on something from Atlético this season?
That's a trap I've fallen into as well, and it's a trap quite a few of the pundits and commentators on TNT Sports, I think, also fell into. And Terry Gibson, the former player and Spanish football expert, raised it on social media. Yeah, I'd be interested to hear what Sid has to say.
I'm laughing because I could kind of I'm quite enjoying the chance to respond to this because I did notice on our minute by minute that I think it was Joe Cole on TNT had prefaced this game as beauty against the beast. And you know, that Atletico will be all ugly and Barcelona will be all wonderful to watch and stuff. And it just isn't true. It just isn't the way that Atletico play. Atletico still have that in them. And actually, there was quite a lot of criticism last night. I didn't get a chance to hear very much of it, but post-game, listening to some of the radio responses to it, of what Atletico did in the second half, this idea that you're a man up and a goal up, go and kill them, go and score 5, as if that was really, really easy. I actually thought Atletico managed that second half pretty well. And the second goal is, I think, a really good example of that, of slowing it down, bringing it back round and creating the chance. But you look at Atletico Madrid this season, they beat Barcelona 4-0 at home in the Copa del Rey. And then they went away and lost 3-0 and they were hanging on and people criticised them for it. Well, you know, they got through against Barcelona, scoring 4 goals against them. Last year in the Copa del Rey against Barcelona, it was 4-4. They went to Betis and scored 5. If you look at their goals this year, they are just not that team that wins 1-0 anymore. The surprise last night wasn't so much that Atletico scored 2, is that they didn't concede any. You know, this just isn't true, that Atletico are this team. So yeah, I saw Terry Gibson's tweet and I thought, yep, that sounds about right. Now, admittedly, it's very easy to be a smart ass when you follow a league and everyone else doesn't. You go, well, look at this. But I do think that, and this happens in Spain, by the way, this happens with people who do watch Atletico all the time, that there is a kind of, if you like, a comfort in saying, oh, well, there's Simeone. And it just isn't true. Admittedly, I do think that some of Simeone's instincts are to be protective and so on. There was an interesting comment that Simeone made in the pre-match press conference, and I can't remember the question, but I can remember the answer. So I'm not 100% sure of the context, but I think it was about Barcelona and defensiveness and being open and so on. And his answer was, teams who attack better tend to defend worse. In other words, you know, the old short blanket theory. You can cover your head and your toes. You can't cover both. Up to a point, it's a choice. But then within that choice, you then got to try and perfect the elements of that choice that you make. And he said, and that's the process that we're in. And it was his admittance that, yeah, we're not defending like we once did. But that's partly because we're now attacking differently to how we once did. Now, obviously, all of this is also a product of what you've got available to you. So if you've got a team that has Simeone Jr., that has Julián Alvarez, that has Alex Baena, that has Antoine Griezmann, that has Sorloth, that has Lookman, who started on the left-hand side last night, it's natural that your evolution is going to be into something else. And at times there has been that question mark about whether there's a slight disconnect between what the manager wants them to be and what the players that they've got mean that they really should be.
Although it would be complete insanity to cover your head with a duvet and have your toes exposed. I mean, I understand the point, but that would be a mad way to try to sleep. Anyway, Lars, you wanted to.
I'm just going to switching the play like Pedri, I do think on the subject of the Terry Gibson tweet, he also mentioned Barcelona's high line, which in fairness, I do think there's a plot line here. Bearing in mind that after Barcelona lost very badly to Atleti earlier in the year, there was the story going around that the players had a chat with Flick about this high line, about whether sometimes they need to ease off a little bit. And then this tie essentially turns on a ball in behind that leads to a red card. Like, is this being discussed at all? Because that's how they got done here, essentially.
Yeah, it is how they got done, and you know, it is a recurring theme, and it is a recurring theme not just in terms of what's happening on the pitch, but in terms of the way that everyone analyses Barcelona and endlessly. And I can't remember which game it is. I think it's the Rayo Vallecano game, where one of Rayo's players said after the game, the manager told us about, and he actually called it the Flick line. It sounded like a military
it's like the Maginot line.
Exactly, it's exactly like a military defence or something. The Flick line. And everybody's aware of that. And Flick has talked about there being a slight modification to that. But what Flick always insists, and obviously in fairness, he's right to insist on this, is that, you know, up to a point, let's go back to the blanket, shall we? You take a choice over which bit you cover. And if you play with a high line because you think the benefits outweigh the risks. Now, Flick's argument is always, and I think he's right, and I think that, although admittedly there are times when you look at it and you think, you know, if we can all see this, why can't you see it? And of course the answer is he can see it. But he thinks it's worth it. His answer is always it's actually not so much about where that line is, but about how well you press and about not allowing the other team to have the time on the ball to be able to play that pass over the top. Because although that pass is quite simple in the sense that there's a lot of space to hit and it doesn't need to be perfectly accurate to go beyond the other team's defence, you still need to be able to get that pass away. And in fairness to Flick, this team won every domestic competition last year, got to the Champions League semi-final, was the width of a post away from reaching a Champions League final. This year looks like they're going to win the league again. They got knocked out of the Copa del Rey. And in that Copa del Rey game, by the way, the 4-0 against Atlético Madrid, Atlético just streamed through them. And it was that high line thing. But Flick's argument is it's more about how well we press and how well we do the mechanics. And this is one of the reasons why when you look at Rafinha and everyone talks about the goals and assists, when Barcelona fans are watching Barca every week, and when Flick looks at Rafinha, what they see is the guy that leads the press and the guy that's contagious. And this is one of the reasons why, for all of his other qualities and for all the fact that numerically Rashford's season has been brilliant, you know, you couldn't ask for more for Rashford numerically. One of the doubts is, but does he do that stuff that makes the whole structure work? And Rashford was, statistically, I think their most dangerous player last night. I think it was 6 shots or 7 shots or something, and kept going at now El Molina. But there is always that doubt about, does the collective functioning work as well when Rafinha is not there? Because Rafinha is so important for that.
Don't tell Wilson there's a former Man United player who doesn't press, because he'll write 55 articles about it in the next year. We have talked about Atleti being good, but Barca created a lot. And if their finishing had been better, they would have been ahead. And they still had chances when they were down to 10. Yeah,
there was a suggestion made by both Flick and Simeone actually dealt with this yesterday. That moment when it's 1-0 and you're a man down, and whether you stick to it or whether you try and draw it back. And there was, I think there will be some people as they start to pick over it today who will think perhaps Barcelona could have tried to hold on to the one rather than go and look for it, because then you go away to Atlético Madrid, and Barcelona winning 1-0 at Atlético Madrid is perfectly plausible. Barcelona scoring 2 goals at Atlético Madrid is also perfectly plausible, though I suspect that Atlético will score. There we are, destroying the cliche again. I suspect Atlético will score, but they may well concede. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's not over. I think it's a big, big lead, though, for Atlético, who've been really, really good at home this season. And, shall we say it one more time, been really good to watch at home this season as well.
And finally, Sid, your reaction from you and from the rest of Spain on the Real Madrid-Bayern game yesterday?
Well, I don't know about from the rest of Spain. I'll try and give you the rest of Spain's view. I think the rest of Spain's
view. I see you
as
speaking for the whole of Spain.
For the whole.
We've got all the rest of Spain in Sid's hotel room right now. It's really crowded in there.
I am the voice of the nation. It's an annoying voice, isn't it? I think the feeling was that for 60 minutes we saw a reflection of how Real Madrid have been this year, and we saw a really, really good Bayern. There's a real sense of, wow, they're good, aren't they? Particularly Olise. I think everyone's watched Olise and go, what Olise did to Carreras, and it makes me laugh a little bit. Should we go back onto destroying cliches or obvious tropes? The obvious trope that Trent can't defend. Well, the 2 fullbacks, the one that was struggling to defend wasn't Trent. It was Carreras who was getting taken to bits by Olise. But then we also saw that Real Madrid reaction. And that, I think, makes everyone think that maybe there is a chance because Real Madrid. I'm using this word a lot today. It's a bit of a cliche, but you sort of think if there's someone who can turn this around, if there's someone who can be a bit illogical, because Real Madrid haven't been good all year, but they have their little moments and they have lots of very good players, and most of the time it's not functioning well. But you just sort of think, if they get it right, if Bayern Munich allow them to counter them and to run at them, then maybe there's half a chance. But yeah, I think the overall feeling was one of Real Madrid's qualities and weaknesses both got shown in this game. And actually, the structural weaknesses are probably too great to really expect them to win anything. But hey, it's Real Madrid, and that's always the answer. There was the front page headline in Marca. I might even have it here for you. Here we go. There's Marcus. I'm doing it. There's Marcus' front page.
Yeah. Sorry, you can say James Richardson. It's allowed, Sid. Don't worry.
Can I? I'm doing the James Richardson here. Anyway. It's the front page just says where for as long as there is life, and so. They're clinging to that.
Good stuff, Sid. Thanks for coming on, pal.
Very much a pleasure. Cheerio.
Sid Lowe there, out in Spain. And that'll do for part 2. Part 3, we'll preview the Premier League action this weekend. Welcome to part 3 of the Guardian Football Weekly. So the Premier League returns after quite a while away, with an international break and FA Cup as well. And it begins, Barry, on Friday night, West Ham Wolves. And this is so huge for West Ham, isn't it? Because a win takes them out of the relegation zone, puts Spurs in it. But if they don't win against quite a good Wolves team, psychologically, you feel you might not recover.
Yeah, I think you've nailed it there. Wolves, quite a good Wolves team. I think it's a bit of a stretch. They're considerably better than the shockingly bad Wolves team that started the season and continued for 5 or 6 games into the Rob Edwards reign, but they are significantly better. It wouldn't surprise me if they beat West Ham. They've had over 2 weeks off. West Ham had that quite grueling FA Cup match against Leeds last weekend. It's a game West Ham simply have to win, you'd think, and if they don't, they will only have themselves to blame for anything that happens to them from here on in. They should have enough about them to beat Wolves at home, but will they? It's impossible to guess, really.
I mean, I hope they don't. Yes, Lars.
So since the 1st of January, Wolves have taken 14 points in 12 and West Ham have taken 15 in 12. So they're both kind of recovered into something resembling passable lower mid-table form. But of course, because of sins earlier in the season, they're both right down in it. I think it could be a terrible game, entertainment and quality-wise. This could be absolutely dreadful because they're both teams that excel at counter-punching, but none of them really want to control the game, I don't think. And given the nerves involved, I mean, this could be horrendous. But it could be one of those you have to watch it still. You have to bring out the popcorn, but maybe not one for the... Yeah.
You're probably right. And then the next game is the early kickoff on Saturday, Philippe. Arsenal against Bournemouth. I mean, that was a crucial win yesterday against Sporting. Oof. Has that suddenly changed your whole feelings or not? Because Bournemouth have a decent record against Arsenal, I think.
Yes, they do. And it's often been Arsenal's problem to actually fail when you don't really expect them to. But yes, it felt absolutely huge. And thank you again, David Raya, whom I don't see his name mentioned as among the candidates for Footballer of the Year, but he's been Arsenal's best player this season. And I think he again showed it at Sporting, and when he's not around, we see the difference in a big way. Anyway, but what I'm expecting on Saturday is pain, then more pain. And I don't expect it to be a glorious cavalcade of young Arsenal attackers rampaging through the cherry orchard at all. I'm expecting something, yes, really painful, slow, everybody looking at each other with their head in their hands. And it's going to be like this until the end of the season, I'm afraid, because that's my preview. And I think you'll find that I wasn't too far from reality when we talk about this later on.
It is so fascinating because if you look around Europe, like the top teams, when we've spoken about it on this, like most of the ones have this in common, is that they can be absolutely devastating going forward, but you don't really trust them down the other end. If you talk about Bayern, if you talk about Barcelona, if you talk about Real Madrid, same with PSG, really. And then there's Arsenal, who are like the best defense in Europe, but like a lot of the times it's not a ton of fun, Philippe. They're the big outlier here.
Yeah, it's just the point that basically, I'm trying to write a column about this. You love football and you want your team to win, but you don't actually want your team to be in with a chance of winning because it's just so agonizing that they might not win, and then they might be at the bottom, and then that's agonizing as well. So
the
really,
Spurs fan speaketh.
Exactly. You just want to be mid-table. Chelsea play Man City at 4:30 on Sunday. So obviously a lot depends on the Arsenal result from Saturday, but you feel like City probably need to win all their games pretty much to win the title.
You'd think so, yes. But obviously that depends on how Arsenal get on. Chelsea's record against Man City in the Premier League, recent record is dismal. They haven't won in 9. And City have won 4 of their last 5 at Stamford Bridge in the league. Chelsea are not in a good Premier League place at the moment. They've won 1 in 6. If they hit their straps, they could cause City no end of problems. But I would expect City to win this. They have to win it, basically. They have to. Yeah, they do.
And then Lars, 2 p.m, the Stadium of Light. Roberto De Zerbi's first game as the Tottenham manager. Oh, I just can't.
Feels like a big occasion, Max. Well, given that he's not exactly the unity candidate, I feel like a good start is important. But the Stadium of Light is not the easiest place to go.
It is at the moment, Lars.
Well,
it's
that's the thing. Yeah,
the fortress.
But have you watched Tottenham play football recently, Barry Glendenning?
I have, yes.
Are you familiar with the work of the Tottenham? I was looking at one of these websites that do previews for this game, and in the comments section, one of the readers has predicted that this will be a 37-0 home win, and interestingly, the username of the reader has THFC in it. So this is the level of self-loathing from the Spurs fans at this point is pretty historic. I don't know, man. I stick, but I think Roberto De Zerbi is a smart guy. I think he's a very dangerous candidate for this moment, and I am I'll be watching this from behind the sofa.
Yeah, when it comes to De Zerbi, the fact is, I was rereading this interview that Lewis Dunk gave. I don't know if you remember it.
Yes.
In which he talked of the first 2 weeks were carnage. I love that word carnage to describe what De Zerbi brings. And the other thing is that, of course, you arrive and it's been an international break. But the thing that everybody would know that the De Zerbi's temple is basically the training ground. But Tottenham, wherever they are in the league, they still had 13 players on international duty who only came back quite late.
Yeah.
And not necessarily in the best of conditions, by the way. So he's had barely any time to actually work with those players before the trip to Sunderland. And the problem is that you feel that this weekend is the pivotal moment. West Ham beats Wolves, goes out. If Tottenham do not go out of relegation zone, do not win, they have to win. Not a draw is not enough. If they do not win at Sunderland, then the only way is down, I'm afraid.
Maybe this is the way. Thomas Frank tried to motivate them. Igor Tudor seemed to try to demoralize them. That none of those things worked. Maybe confusing the players is the way to go. Like, you just got to push a different button, befuddle them in the manner of De Zerbi. Maybe this is the way.
Their last win in the Premier League was against Brentford on the 6th of December. That is more than 4 months. 4 months ago. Colin Miller tweeting, since January the 1st, 2025, a period of 15 months, PSG have won more home matches against Premier League teams than Tottenham have. De Zerbi did, on the subject of, the comments he made about Mason Greenwood, he did apologise, and it was good that he apologised, and he apologised for making a stance. And you've always got to be aware that it's not his first language, but there was a bit of the "I'm sorry if you were offended" about the apology. So I think we have to look at his actions after that. But it was good that he said something rather than nothing. Forest also in trouble. They play Villa same time as Spurs go to Sunderland. Villa beat them 3-1 in January, if that makes any difference. But they are, Lars, still fighting for stuff, Villa. So this is a really hard one to call, I think.
Yeah, so Villa seemed like they were... Okay, I'm one of those sort of stats nerds who've kept like going on about Villa's XG all year. And then recently... the results have turned. Like the much expected villaing has happened, whether that's to do with they're regressing to the mean or whether it's just Kamara being injured and they're missing their holding midfielder. It's hard to say. But then that win against West Ham, the in-form West Ham, they suddenly beat 2-0 last weekend. So I guess the very short answer is who knows with Villa at the moment. Who knows?
The other side of danger, Leeds go to Old Trafford on Monday, so we'll cover that next week. Palace, Newcastle, Brentford, Everton is,
huge.
Both of those, sorry, both of these guys are in with a shout of the Champions League. I mean, it's unlikely, but it's possible.
No, this is a Champions League 6-pointer basically. They're both on 46 points. Brentford are above Everton just by 2 goals. The corresponding fixture at Hill Dickinson was a good game. Brentford won that 4-2. And in the second half of this season, Everton, who I famously tipped for relegation, the only teams who've picked up more points than them are Arsenal and Manchester United. Now, I noticed Brentford in Igor Thiago have a striker who's on 19 goals in the league this season. Where the hell would Everton be in the table if they had a striker who was on 19 goals this season? I think they'd be top.
It's a very good point.
I do think for Chelsea,
yes,
for all the money they've spent in the last few years, to be 2 points ahead of a team that has Beto up front is like everyone should be thoroughly ashamed of themselves.
Yeah, Burnley, Brighton, Liverpool, Fulham as well. Moving on, Adam Crafton tweeting, FIFA made a 30-minute documentary about Infantino's 10 years in power. In addition to making an Infanten brand and throwing parties in Miami and Switzerland, bombarded the world of football asking for messages of congratulations. Would love to know how much was spent on it. Oh, man. I mean, he did tweet a link to the documentary. I haven't brought myself yet to watch it. I don't know if I can, but maybe for professional reasons it has to be done. Philippe, you wanted to talk about a Josimar piece that you're doing on FIFA's partner ADI Predict Street.
Yeah, the world famous ADI Predict Street. I mean, I don't know if people are really aware what prediction markets are, but they're basically huge in America. Everybody will have heard of Polymarket and maybe Kalshi as well. They're basically betting operators who offer odds. You play against other people on absolutely everything. And it can be the World Cup, the identity of the winner of the World Cup, but it also can be really controversial. That's a very polite way of saying it. Things such as, when will Israel bomb Beirut again? You can bet on this kind of thing. It's absolutely disgraceful. Absolutely disgusting.
My God.
And prediction markets are actually prohibited in most of Europe. They are not just illegal, they're prohibited. FIFA has decided, having seen the amount of money that had been put on Polymarket on the World Cup, if you can believe it, I checked this morning, we're close to $500 million being bet just on the identity who is going to win the World Cup in 2026 on Polymarket. It's absolutely crazy. So they obviously thought we must make some money. So they went for a company that honestly didn't really exist. Everything's great. Everything's great. And by the way, we've got a little development in that story, which we're publishing later on this afternoon. So go to usemarfootball.com for another very piquant detail about the identity of the new CEO of that company. But anyway, FIFA has signed the deal. And that's it. It's more money in FIFA's coffers. You know, you name it. It's the usual stuff. And what is crazy, Max? In the long run, it will make absolutely no difference.
Well, do any of us exist? Would be perhaps their defense. We don't know. Maybe we're all just ephemeral in this thing. But, you know, good on you for doing some good work. And that'll do it for today. Thanks, everybody. We will be back on Monday. Barry may be alive. We will find out then.